Are you thinking about getting a Betta fish and you want to learn how to cycle a tank? You've come to the right spot. My name's Suzy and this is QueAquatics and Exotics. And today we're going to... What? Oh, you already have the fish and it's sitting on your counter. No worries. No judgments here. I've been there, done that. So stay to the end of the video and I will show you how I kept my fish alive while I was cycling my tank. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, it's SuzyQue.
I'm going to help you set up your tank for success. We'll get a couple of items you're going to need to cycle your tank. You're going to need the tank, you're going to need air pump, sponge filter, water, your gravel, your decoration. Everything that you're going to use to set up the tank for your fish, you're going to set up but without the fish. But right now we're going to cycle a tank. The first thing you're going to want to do is cycle a tank is grow two specific bacteria. Yes, you're going to grow bacteria, beneficial bacteria. You're going to want to grow two very important organisms in your water. Don't worry, you don't have to initiate them. They're already in the water. As long as there's oxygen in the tank and there's ammonia in the tank, these colonies are going to grow. So some of the main reasons that you're going to want to put your gravel in the tank, as well as the decorations and sponge filter, is because these two organisms only going to grow on the surface areas. So the more surface areas you have, the better you will be. So the first thing we're going to do is put water in our tank. I use tap water. The problem is the tap water is made for humans to drink, which means they got some chlorines and chloramines and some things in there that may not be very good for our fish. So we get a water conditioner that helps neutralize those chlorines and chloramines. So now that you have the water conditioner in, these organisms need oxygen. So I got a little USB air pump that you just plug right into a socket, and it comes with an air stone. So now it's got some oxygen. And how we're going to grow, now we don't have to worry about putting the bacteria in here because all bodies of water have them. We're just going to cultivate it a little bit. And how we're going to cultivate it is by ammonia. Now ammonia, you can either use straight up ammonia, but you have to make sure it's 100% ammonia. Or you could feed your tank. I pretend there's fish in my tank and just feed them. That food waste turns into ammonia. Any way I do it, I have to continually feed these things. Let's talk about what they are. There's two very specific organisms that you're going to be growing. The names aren't really important, but if you care about it, it's a Nitrosomonas and a Nitrobacter. Doesn't matter their name, both of them have very specific jobs to do. So what the first one is going to do, the Somonas, it's going to take that ammonia, that ammonia in your tank could kill your fish. It's very toxic and it's going to burn the gills, suffocate it. It's not a pretty sight. So once we create that ammonia, the first one is going to oxidize that ammonia and turn it into nitrites. Nitrites is very poisonous for your fish, just as ammonia is. So you're going to need that second bacteria to eat that nitrite and convert it over to nitrates. And then when the nitrate level gets about this much, you know we have a nitrogen cycle going. So this is going to take time. It could take 6 to 8 weeks. Now, this is just an air stone. But because if I'm setting up a 5-gallon tank, I'm probably going to filter it with a sponge filter. As I was editing this video, I noticed I was just talking about the sponge filter. Totally escaped me that if you probably bought this tank at a Walmart, Petco, or PetSmart, it probably came with a hang on the back filter. Go ahead and follow the instructions for the hang on the back filter for the filtration part. Everything else is still the same. I just prefer the sponge filter, so I put a link below if you want to use a sponge filter, but the hang on the back filter is just as good. Back to the video. So inside this sponge filter is already an air stone. So instead of using this air stone that came with it, I'm going to plug it into this air stone in here. And I'm going to squeeze it. Saturate the sponge with water so it sinks to the bottom. So this colony is going to grow on the surface area. It's not going to really grow in the water. It's going to grow all along this column. It's going to grow in every crevice of that sponge. It's going to grow on every place that it has contact with the gravel. It's going to grow on the sides of the glass. We want to keep that growing. The whole reason it takes about 6 to 8 weeks is because first you have to build up the ammonia. So as the ammonia is building up, you might see all your water turning a bit cloudy. That's a bacteria bloom. You want that. That's great. Do not change your water. If you start changing your water, you're going to be like starting back at square one. So we're going to want to make sure that we keep this going. So now you test it. A couple weeks into it, the ammonia is going to be up high. I could test this water right now and it would show no ammonia, no nitrites, and no nitrates because it's a fresh tank. So it could give me a false positive. If I see those 0 ammonia and 0 nitrites, I'm going to make sure I test all 3 to ensure. Because if all 3 come up 0, I don't have a cycle tank. So when you're testing the water, it'll take about 2 weeks. The ammonia should be about 0.06. So you're going to see that spike nice, whether you're using the test strips or whether you're using the test kit, you're going to see your ammonia spike up to 0.06. The first bacteria, the Nitrosomonas, is going to oxidize the ammonia. It's going to, let's just say it's going to eat that ammonia and turn it into nitrites. So now when you test, as it turns into nitrites, your ammonia is going to read 0, but your nitrites is going to go up and up and up. So the nitrites is going to get up to 0.75. And that's going to take a couple weeks. Now you're going to have the Nitrobacter eating at the nitrites until, and oxidizing them and turning them into nitrates. So now when you test, it's going to be 0 ammonia, 0 nitrites, and now you're going to have nitrates. Now your tank is cycled. So you're going to want to keep testing there during this time, which is another reason why the test strips may not be the best choice if you're trying to save money. Go ahead and get a water test kit. It'll last for a very long time. If you get test strips, these test strips test for nitrite and nitrate, but do not test for ammonia. You'd have to get other test strips to test for ammonia. So it can get kind of pricey when you're using the strips. I would suggest you get the water testing kit. Comes with test tubes, it's super easy. Now it's ready for a fish, but you're going to want to do a water change. Because nitrates, although it's not toxic, that's your job to do in the fish keeping hobby, is to keep the nitrates down. So once the tank is cycled, you'll just have to test every couple weeks in the beginning to make sure that your ammonia is at 0, your nitrates are at 0, and as your nitrates grow, you're going to want to do a water change. That means taking out some of this water, adding fresh water in using the water conditioner. This takes about 6 to 8 weeks, so you might need a little bit of patience. There are some products out there that say they have these 2 bacteria in them. I haven't tested them, but if you're starting off scratch like I did in the beginning, you're just going to have to be patient, 6 to 8 weeks. So keep in mind, while this whole tank is going through that cycle with the ammonia really spiked high, super poisonous for fish, nitrites spiked up, very bad for fish, then the nitrites go down and the nitrates come up and then it starts to be livable for fish. You don't want your fish in this tank for those first 3, 5, 6 weeks because it's just going to burn their gills. It's going to suffocate them. I wouldn't want it for my fish. So now let's talk about that fish you have sitting on your counter. If you leave that fish in that cup, it's going to be poisoned. It's going to poison itself with ammonia. That's not good. So if you have another container, I happen to have this gallon tank. You need a little bit bigger tank to keep this fish alive during that cycle process. So now you're in a pretty bad situation because you have a fish, whether you impulse bought this or one of your children brought it into the house, this tank isn't ready for this fish for at least 6 to 8 weeks. I certainly don't want to take this gorgeous fish and choke him out and burn his gills and have him swim in his own ammonia. Here's what I had to do. Have a larger container, about a ½ gallon to a gallon, and you're going to want the same amount of water because you're going to be doing water changes every day. So fill this up with water, put water conditioner in it, and let it sit overnight so it gets to the same temperature. So now you're going to have the same temperature. You're going to need to change out his water every day, but he's also going to need oxygen. So what I do is with the same USB, I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to add a splitter to it. All you're going to do is take this, Let's go right here. Put this on here. Okay. Put this on here. Cut some hose. Put the air stone on. There we go. So now this tank has some oxygen and this tank has some oxygen. This is actually a sponge filter that we're going to keep in the tank as we go. So we kind of want the beneficial bacteria to be growing on here. So as this tank is cycling, you're going to change the water on this every day. You're going to make sure this water is the same temperature as this water, coming from the same source, so as not to shock your fish. That way, he's not. You might think to yourself, well, if I'm going to do that, why don't I just put my fish in this tank and change the water every day? What that's going to do is every time your ammonia builds up and you change the water, you got to start all over again. And you're going to start all over again. And it's going to take a very long time for this tank to cycle. This way, this tank can cycle, you can monitor it, you know where it's going. While you're monitoring it, you're going to test this to make sure that there's nothing going wrong. The only thing is you can't just plop this fish in here. So what we're going to do is what I like to do is I take some of this water out, put this much water in, and then let them sit for a few minutes. What I'm doing is I'm acclimating this fish to this water. I do not want him to go in this water and be shocked. After 5-10 minutes, I'm going to pour some more of this water out, pour this water in. Now once he's acclimated, I'm going to pour all this water out and put him in the fresh tank. But you can avoid all this. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of dedication. This is dedication to keeping this fish alive and healthy. It's a lot easier if you just don't get the fish till after the tank is cycled. Then I can add a little enrichment for them. So the purpose of this was not to show you how to set up a Betta tank, because this is pretty boring. It's more on how to cycle your tank and get it ready for your Betta fish. Or beta fish, whichever you want to call it. So I hope this wasn't too complicated. I don't think it was too complicated. But I know when I was new to the fish keeping hobby, I didn't have the patience and I didn't quite get it. It's very simple. I'm going to summarize real quick. I'm going to feed the tank. I'm going to create the ammonia in here so that the ammonia starts coming up. And this is going to build this bacteria to eat this and change it into nitrites. This should take about 2 weeks. Then this bacteria is going to eat those nitrites and turn it into nitrates. Now it's going to take a couple weeks. So now you got a couple weeks going. You're going to be testing it. You're going to making sure everything's going good. You're going to keep feeding the tank. Because let me tell you, if you stop feeding the tank, then the bacteria aren't going to keep colonizing. They're going to be starving and dying off. You don't want them to die off. You want to keep growing, so you keep feeding the tank. So if you stop feeding the tank, the colony stops growing. And that is how I cycle a tank from scratch. So I hope this has helped you in some way on your road to cycling your tank. You just gotta be patient. It's gonna happen. Thanks for coming along and checking out how to cycle a tank. I'll see you next time.